Hey there, and welcome. So, as a teacher, you already know the classroom is just this constant buzz of communication, right? But what if I told you the most important messages aren't the ones you're hearing? What if they're in what your students don't say? We're going to dive right into that powerful, unspoken language of the classroom.
All right, let's kick things off with a story about a student. We'll call her Jennifer. Now, Jennifer actually loves her history class, but one day she's not feeling great. You know the feeling. The problem is her instructor doesn't see unwell. They see bored and annoyed. Jennifer's posture, her facial expression, it's sending a totally wrong message, a complete miscommunication, and not a single word was even said.
And that story, it really brings up a huge question for every single one of us in education. How many Jennifers are sitting in your classroom right now? You know, that student who looks like they're being defiant, they might just be confused. And the one who seems totally checked out, maybe they're just exhausted. Getting this right, wow, it's a high-stakes game. It shapes everything from how you manage your classroom to whether a student falls in love with learning or just gives up.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to break this whole thing down. First, we'll look at why this unspoken classroom stuff matters so much. Then we're going to decode the secret language of nonverbal communication. After that, we get super practical. We'll talk about using these skills to build relationships, to read what your students are really feeling, and finally, how to master your own teacher presence.
All right, let's jump into our first section, the unspoken classroom. Here's the thing. The reality is that our brains are just hardwired to pay way more attention to nonverbal cues. A student's slump, a teacher's quick glance. Believe it or not, those signals often hit us harder and shape our opinions way more than any words ever could.
So just how much are we talking about here? Well, some researchers say it's as high as 80%. Let that sink in for a second. 80%. That means the overwhelming majority of the messages flying around your classroom, messages about confidence, confusion, trust, excitement, all of that is being sent and received without a single word. It's happening completely non-verbally.
Okay, so if nonverbal communication is that important, how in the world do we start to make sense of it all? Well, the good news is it's not just random chaos. You can actually think of it like a language, one that works with 3 different codes. And once you get a handle on these codes, you can start to become fluent in what your students and, honestly, what you are really saying.
First up, we have what's called the intrinsic code. These are the signals we're pretty much all born with. They're universal, they're biological. Think about a real, genuine yawn from a sleepy student, or when someone blushes from embarrassment, or that little wince of pain. These signals are like unfiltered symptoms of what's going on inside. You don't have to learn them, you just feel them.
Next, there's the iconic code. Now, these signals are more like intentional imitations of the real thing. Researchers actually have a cool word for them, semblances. So this is like when a student puts on that classic thinking face to show they're really pondering something, or when a teacher pretends to be surprised to help encourage a shy student. We're basically mimicking a natural intrinsic signal to get through a social situation.
And last but not least, we have the arbitrary code. Okay, this is where things can get a little tricky. These are the symbols we have to learn. Their meaning is completely based on social and cultural agreements. Think about it. A thumbs up, a nod, a handshake. None of those gestures actually mean anything on their own. We as a culture decide what they mean. We give them their power.
And here is a perfect, and I mean perfect, example of how powerful and potentially dangerous this arbitrary code can be. Take the simple OK sign. Here in the US, it means all good. But in some other cultures, it can be a really offensive gesture. Now, in our incredibly diverse classrooms today, you just can't assume a gesture means the same thing to everyone. The huge takeaway here, context is absolutely everything.
Okay, so now that we know how to decode these signals, let's actually put them to use. How can we take all of this knowledge about nonverbal communication and use it to build stronger relationships in the classroom? We're going to start with 2 of the most powerful and honestly most overlooked tools in a teacher's toolkit, space and touch.
And that brings us to this idea called proxemics, which is basically the study of personal space. The easiest way to think about it is like you have 4 invisible zones around you. Public distance, that's you at the front of the room talking to the whole class. Then there's social distance. That's perfect for when you're helping out with small group work. Then you get closer with personal distance. That's when you kneel down to have a one-on-one chat with a student. And that last zone, intimate distance, yeah, that one's pretty much never appropriate in a school setting.
So why does this matter so much? Well, it's simple, really. When you respect a student's personal space, you're building trust. You're creating comfort. Standing too close can feel super intimidating, right? But standing too far away can make you seem distant, like you don't care. When you start consciously managing your distance, you're actively creating a safer and way more effective learning environment for every single student.
All right, let's move on and tackle one of the most vital skills a teacher can have, reading the emotional temperature of the room. Your students' nonverbal cues are basically your best thermometer. But you've got to know what to look for, and a lot of times it's about looking past the really obvious stuff.
So there's this groundbreaking research from Paul Ekman, and what he found is that the facial expressions for these 6 big emotions are pretty much universal across all cultures. A smile for happiness, a frown for sadness. You get the idea. This is that intrinsic code we talked about in action, and that's great. It gives you a really reliable baseline for figuring out what a student might be feeling. But is it ever really that simple in a classroom? Heh, of course not. Just because these expressions are universal doesn't mean they're always genuine. I mean, the classroom is a super complex social world, right? And students get really good at managing how they look, both to their friends and to you.
And this is all governed by something called display rules. Think of these as the unwritten social rules about which emotions are okay to show and when you can show them. So a student who is absolutely crushed by a bad grade might just force a completely blank face. Or another one might be hiding some deep frustration behind a polite little smile. Your job, your challenge really, is to learn how to see past that performance. You have to spot the subtle little cues that show you what's really going on underneath.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking about how to read your students. Now, let's flip the script. Let's turn the camera around and talk about you. Mastering your own nonverbal signals, what we call your teacher presence, it's essential. It's crucial for classroom management, for building that all-important rapport, and just for becoming a better, more effective communicator overall.
I want you to think of these as the core tools in your toolkit. First up, posture. Standing tall with an open posture, that sends a message of confidence and friendliness. Crossed arms, on the other hand, can make you look defensive. Second is something called paralinguistics, which is a fancy word for everything about your voice except the words, your tone, your pitch, your volume. A warm, steady tone can back up a positive message, but a sharp or hesitant tone can totally destroy it. And finally, your eye gaze. Making that steady, consistent eye contact with your students, that tells them, I see you, I'm listening, and I'm right here with you.
So, what can you do to get better at this, like starting today? Here are 4 super practical steps you can take. Number 1, just start paying attention to your own behaviors. What are your hands doing when you're teaching? Number 2, become a student of other people. Watch how they communicate. Number 3, look for the mismatches. You know, when a student's words say, oh, I'm fine, but their body language is screaming the exact opposite. And finally, and listen, this is the most important one of all, ask before you assume. A simple, gentle, hey, I noticed you seem a little quiet today. Is everything okay? That can open a door that making an assumption would have slammed shut for good. Because at the end of the day, every single nonverbal signal you send is a choice. It's a choice to build trust. It's a choice to show you care. It's a choice to create a classroom that feels confident and safe. So, as you get ready for your next class, I want to leave you with one final question to really think about. What unspoken message will you choose to send tomorrow?